Well, good morning everyone. Thank you for that very flattering introduction. A lot of people talk about how busy I am, but we all got 24 hours, right? So it's how we use those 24 hours, that's what matters the most. I was flattered to be invited here. It's been a very an incredible journey over the last 10 years, building the 3 businesses. The logos are up there today, and self-inflicted pain currently, and I'll tell you that story in a minute. But the reality is I've been fortunate enough over the last couple of years to be invited to speak at different events, and a lot of the primarily industry events around retail and technology, but this one I felt was a bit close to my heart because I actually never went to university, and it's probably the one thing I regret that I missed out on, not necessarily for the academic part, but more for the fun, for the 3 years, when everyone talks about their war stories of going through uni. But Greenwich University was actually one of the universities I applied to and one I wanted to go to, because I lived in Bromley. So when I was looking, all my friends, I think it's a cultural thing by the way, the British families, English families, like, I want to go to Newcastle, I want to go to Afghanistan, I want to get away. And my mum was like, you're going nowhere. She was like, you're going to stay in London. I was like, well, I've got to apply, so I applied. And Greenwich was one of my shortlisted unis that in my heart I hope I'd be accepted for. It transpired that I didn't go, and I'll explain that in a second as well. But lovely to be here, thank you.
Full circle moment, you're back now.
I'm back.
It's brilliant. And yeah, we're definitely going to dive into more of the story because it's very inspiring. For those who don't know, so you're founder and CEO of Fabulous,
Yeah.
founder of Nobody's Child,
Yeah.
founder of Satora.
Yeah.
So these are your 3 babies. Of course, you've got other.
I've got real babies, two amazing little girls.
Could you give us like a one-line overview on each business and how they're currently performing? Because when you say you're running 3 businesses, sometimes people think, oh, one's probably dying and the other one's succeeding. These are businesses. So could you just give us a little bit of overview on what?
Yeah, I think first we'll give you the context as to how I ended up with 3 businesses. I think that's more logical to then try and explain what they do and how I ended up there, I suppose. So my DNA is very humble beginnings. We were raised in a council flat in Camden Town, a very traditional Greenwich family, and my parents had a small CMT factory making women's wear dresses in North London, so we were basically raised in the underbelly of Harrogate, and I went to Holly Boys School, which was voted the worst school in Britain for 2 years successively. So I had a very interesting trajectory going through the years, but I had 2 other brothers that kept me honest. So we were very ambitious, and then we eventually moved to Bromley when I was about 12 now, by the way, now that world. And then I went into the wild, and like every entrepreneur, I suppose, I tried everything. I mean, everything. A whole array of different businesses, shapes and sizes, to try and make it work. And it was really about 20 years ago where my oldest brother at the time was working for a manufacturer and he'd fallen out with them. And I rang him and I said, look, why don't we try and do this on our own? You're very good at products and I can manage everything else. So between us, let's give it a go. And my older brother's a pain in the ass and a pessimist. So he was like, no, we can never make it work, we don't have any money, no. Well, let's just try and then we'll figure it out. And so we started manufacturing. And we leveraged our small factory in North London. We had a couple of relationships with some of the sort of junior buyers in the retailers, and we started making women's wear for a couple of the retailers. And then, over 10 years, we built that to a pretty meaningful business. We got it from sort of nothing to 110 million a year in group, which was an incredible number. It was like 600,000-700,000 units a week that we were producing. So a very big operation that we were very proud of. But the reality is, even with those numbers, net after tax, low margins, between partners, we were just on amazing salaries, right? So I'll take that because from where I come from, it was incredible. It gave me a little bit of security and stability for the first time in my life. And at this point, I'd have been sort of early 30s, and I wasn't passionate about manufacturing dresses, right? Like that was never my calling. I tried everything I could in my life to not go down that sort of rabbit hole, but it transpired that we were just very good at it, and we made a living from it. But at that point is when I ventured out and decided that my head and my heart is in technology. And really, I'm a geek. I love data, I love problems, I love problem solving. And I started Fabicus as a little bit of a sandbox to solve a problem in retail that I was quite passionate about. And we discovered 2 or 3 opportunities. I started building software, started building a team. I got the bug, I've got an addictive personality, so I found myself in the wild, invested in sort of half a dozen small early startups that were retail centric, things that I believed I could support or understood the problem that we're trying to solve. And then I got offered this opportunity to start Soretto. A couple of people approached me and said, I want to do this. And I said, this is how I want to build it, this is the idea I've got, and if you guys come in, we'll do it together. So we started Soretto. And then my brother said, you seem to be good at this tech shit. How hard is it to have a website? And I was like, well, it's not hard, but starting a retail business, a brand is hard. And he was like, well, we've got to start a brand. Because if you're going to do your tech stuff, then you have a sort of moral obligation to the family to start a brand. And I was like, God help me. And Nobody's Child was born. So all 3 of these businesses were born within sort of a 12-month window of me getting very excited. Is the terrain, right? The last 10 years don't need me to tell you what we've had to go through. I mean, it feels like every morning you wake up and you read Sky News and there is something new going on that could disrupt your trajectory. But that aside, I started going to more tech events, started socialising, networking, getting more integrated, building Nobody's Child, building a team, and of course you plant these acorns and you have no idea what's going to happen. Now I am an optimist and I'm very self-assured in the things that I understand, because I'd like to think I'm a deep thinker, I'm a very logical thinker. I like to think of everything before I start so that I make sure I preempt or mitigate as much risk as possible. And of course, again, there's no guarantee, there's a lot of things outside of our control, but I always believed in all 3 businesses. I always believed in the problem we were solving. I always believed in our value proposition. I just had no experience in building these businesses, right? I've never built a global technology business. I've never built a retail business. All I've ever been really good at is the logic behind a process. And so Soretto slowly started, Fabicus slowly started, we were engaging clients, it started to look and feel a little bit more exciting, but it was my passion project, I was funding it, I'm still the biggest investor in my own businesses, so I exhausted my own liquidity in my own business because I believed in backing myself. Nobody's Child was going through a very challenging time. The first 3-4 years, building a retail business was like swimming up the Niagara Falls. It was so challenging. Everything was becoming harder. Customer acquisition costs, logistics, a competitive landscape. At the time, there was like 300 brands a day in the UK launching websites. So we're now like sort of year 2, year 3. I then discovered this huge opportunity for Fabicus in licensing, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Soretto was finding its feet. Nobody's Child, we had green shoots, we were running out of money, and then sort of year 5 and 6, everything started to take shape. I ended up selling a third of Nobody's Child to Marks and Spencer's, and I know we're going to come back and deep dive on these things. That became an amazing inflection point for the brand. Of course, went into a pandemic, and I was looking, I remember day 2, I think day 1 I was still in shock, day 2, I was in my kitchen at 5 a.m. and I was basically looking at my entire life as a house of cards. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to come out of this. There is no way. I needed to raise capital for all the businesses. We had no real hero client on Fabicus or Soretto, but we had a great idea. We discovered a great opportunity. I had to furlough my 20 people at Nobody's Child. We owed £2 million to our creditors, so I wrote them a handwritten note from me as the founder saying, please bear with me and I will sort this. And I thought, there's no way we're going to come out of the pandemic. And I sat there and I remember that day 2 writing my hit list of things that I believed would help me get through. And my partner, he's like my guardian angel, my mentor, he's one of my investors, called me up. He's like, how are you? You okay? I was like, well, yeah, I'm cool. He was like, right, what's the plan? And I said, well, let me read it out to you. So I said, Fabulous, we need to secure the partnership with IMG, we need to sign Epic Games, Soretto, we need to sign Samsung, and Nobody's Child, I need to do the deal with M&S. And I've got 3 months to do all of that, or we're dead. And he was like, you've got no chance. He was like, that is a very ambitious wish list. And I said, I get it, but I don't have a choice. And I honestly, till today, and I do pride myself on my work ethic, but also pride myself on work-life balance for my girl's sake. I have never worked that hard from a kitchen in my life. It was like literally 5 a.m. till 2 a.m. every day for 3 months. But what I found fascinating is that whoever I emailed was responding, because everyone was at home. So I was like, I'd emailed the CEO of a company saying, look, I really need to talk to her. Yeah, no problem, fancy a call next Wednesday. And I was like, what? And then you get on a call with them and everyone was just desperate to have good conversations. So I managed to get through to some amazing people. I managed to raise capital virtually, people I'd never met in person before. And somehow miraculously come through the other end. And then we've gone on to build the businesses, and I'll talk a little bit about them in more detail. But I wanted to give you that context and that trajectory that we've been on to end up here, and the fact that I can sit here today, and we're not out of the woods, by the way, on all 3 businesses, but we're on the right trajectory. All of these things are incredibly hard, and it will ultimately always boil down to you as an individual, your own grit, persistence, perseverance, belief. They are the fundamental ingredients to making anything work, because if you don't have that foundation, it actually doesn't matter how great your idea is, it just never comes to fruition, because when it comes to execution, there's always a dependency on you, the individual, because your team look to you, your investors look to you, your board look to you, your family look to you, and at the end of the day, you're the one standing on your own in the rain, right? When it's a payroll at the end of the month, no one comes and says, hold on mate, how much do you need? I'll send it to you. No one says that, right? So it is your problem. And if you don't have those ingredients, then it is a very, very tough terrain to navigate. I just wanted to start with that.
Please give that big round of applause. You guys are complaining about running one business. All right, imagine taking 3 businesses globally all at the same time.
And I said, anyway, what do you do at Disney? And he said, I'm head of digital transformation for Disney and EMEA. And I said, great title, what does that mean? He said, basically, we have 4,000 licensees around the world producing Disney consumer products. So everywhere you go and you see Disney t-shirts, toys, plush, whatever it is, they're not actually produced by Disney. They're produced by the world's biggest retailers and manufacturers that take a license from Disney. And I was like, wow, I obviously never knew this. Never heard of licensing before. And I said, okay. And he said, and the problem is, if you ask anybody in Disney to give you a list of our products, we can't. And I was like, hold on a minute, what do you mean? How is that possible? How can Disney not know their products? He said, because we don't make them. I was like, okay, you've got to elaborate. And he said, well, we have workflow tools and we do this and we do that, but actually it's flawed. And my job is to solve that problem. I need to somehow help our business create what we need as a product catalog. And of course, I was like, I think I can solve that problem. And he was like, really? Why? And I said, well, I'm building a data aggregation platform. And the objective was to actually achieve that for vertical retailers. I've never known that licensing even exists, but there's nothing stopping me incorporating a licensor like Disney into the workflow. I said, I think we should have a coffee about it. So anyway, I chased him for about 6 months, eventually pinned him down, went to the Disney offices, had a meeting, we had a 2-hour whiteboard, and we'd established between us that what I was building could potentially solve this problem. This wasn't a Disney problem, this was a $400 billion licensing industry problem where Disney are number 1. So, obviously very excitable. I've now got the world's largest licensor as my first engaged potential client. But of course I've got to build the technology because I've sold him the dream. So I'm starting to build a team, build technology, He was my point guard for a couple of years. The exec sponsor was the CFO of Disney and Amir, and they acquired Fox at the time, and it became a nightmare reorg. And he was getting quite stressed and frustrated, and by default we were getting caught in the crossfire. So I said to him, right, you know what you need to do? You need to go in tomorrow and tell Disney to stick their job up their ass, and you're going to start with me on Monday, and we're going to go after the rest of the world, and then we're going to come back and get Disney. And he rang me up the next day about 3:30, 4 o'clock. Hello mate, how are you? I'm good. I said, where are you? He goes, I'm at home. I said, what are you doing at home? He goes, I've left Disney. I was like, oh shit. I was like, I'm coming to get you. So I went from the office to Chiswick, picked him up, that's where he lived at the time. And we went to one of the hotels to have a tea and a chat. And he was like, now what? And I said, now you start on Monday. And he was like, okay. So my current chief visionary officer of my company, Waj, is that guy. So he come and joined me. The CFO of Disney Amir retired. We managed to have lunch with him, and I convinced him to become my first investor and non-exec, because we were his favourite project, which was amazing. And then that was it. I started to assemble the Avengers to go after the world's biggest problem, and I believed, because I was stupid enough, that I could get the world's 5 largest studios to play nicely together, adopt one platform globally, headquartered in London, which was like impossible for these big US conglomerates to understand. It took me 5 years, but today we've signed Warner, Paramount, NBC, Hasbro, and of course we're still on that trajectory, but you know, we are in a very different point, and we just had an incredible milestone where the logic to our thesis was simple. If we can get these studios to play nicely together, that we can fix this problem for them, we can then leverage this data to go to the world's biggest retail partners like Amazon and Google and everyone else, and convince them that the way they're working is flawed and that they need to adopt our platform, which again was crazy to believe back then, but we believed in it. And in December last year, for the first time in history, Amazon started emailing the brand saying that to grow your business with us, you need to go through Fabulous, which was like unbelievable. And then we engineered with Amazon 3 weeks ago for the licensing expo in Vegas that they've now started reaching out directly to licensees, telling them that you have to register your products with Fabulous. So we have become the industry standard for verifying IP for licensed consumer products globally. And so Fabulous is a very, very exciting opportunity, but we are still in our infancy because it took 6-7 years to herd the cats and get them to this point. And then Soretto is a very simple proposition. Soretto is a referral technology business, and we managed to cure our first real hero client, which again was a bit of a fairy tale. But you know, we do make our own luck, so don't sell yourself short, right? The work ethic, the time you invest in events and networking and meeting people and maintaining relationships, all of that is hard work, it's investment. But it does yield a return, and Soretto proves that. So I built a relationship with a guy called William Kim, who at the time was the CEO of All Saints, and I got introduced to him through a mutual friend, and he then took a job as head of retail at Samsung back home in South Korea. And my CEO of Soretto one day come round to my desk and he said, I just got the most weird email asking me to do a demo for Samsung tomorrow morning. So I smiled and I was like, I know where that come from. And of course, he does the call, he calls me the next day, it was at 7 a.m. UK, so he called me about 8 o'clock and he's like, mate, I just had a call with like 5 people in South Korea at Samsung who want to roll this out in 63 countries. And I said, can you just give me the names of the people? Of course I didn't understand 3 or 4 of them, and then he gets to one and he goes, William Kim. I said, I knew it. Now what I love about William, he's a dear friend today, is he didn't tell me this. And in fact, he didn't even reach out to me. What he did is he got his team to email my team at Soretto through our website, info@Soretto, to say, can we have a demo, to make sure that we were doing things correctly. So I'll always love him for that, because that was a good kick up the backside. Now I make sure that all of my companies, we maintain, you know, you never know who's going to come knocking, right? If your value proposition is right. And so we secured Samsung, and then of course, as Junior mentioned, we've gone on to secure some amazing hero clients, Nike, Under Armour, Puma, Samsung, Google, and others. The challenge with Soretto, and I want to give you some reality, right? Because I'm not sitting up here with loads of rainbows and unicorns, because that's not a reflection of reality. Reality is, I've had to just put Soretto through rehab, because during the pandemic, when all of our clients were growing drastically online, it was great. We had an amazing time. But like for like, 2 years later, those same clients, their online traffic is down 40%, which my revenue's linked to. So by default, I've had to double my customer base to try and maintain the size of the business. So of course, we go through challenges every single day, and still, till today, till this morning, it's never ending. But Soretto is on a corrective course. Nobody's Child has become the most obvious success story because it's a consumer brand. It's a lot easier for people to understand, look and feel, a lot more PR, of course. But that was again, I was with exhausted our liquidity. I had to basically close the brand. The pandemic made us furlough everyone, which sort of protected us to a degree, which I feel guilty for, but it did protect us. And I got on the call with, I remember messaging the EA of the CEO of M&S, and I said, I need to speak to Steve. And he was like, I get it, but you realise we're in a pandemic. I was like, mate, I know, I need 10 minutes of his time. He said, leave it with me. And lo and behold, he got me a call about 2 weeks in, so now we're in sort of week 3, 4 of the first lockdown. And I get on the call with Steve, and if any of you have ever seen him talk, or you know what he's like, he's an amazing guy, he's a dear friend today, and I owe him so much because he saved us. And I get on the call, and he gives me not one word. The first thing he starts with is, I can't get sausages into Northern Ireland, it's costing me £50 million, I've just furloughed 30,000 people, da, da, da. And I'm like, how do I tell this guy that if we don't do this deal, I'm dead? Like, the brand's got to go. So I let him rant for about 10 minutes. He's like, anyway, how are you? How can I help? And I'm like, well, funny you should ask. I said, Steve, I need 3 things. And I get it, it's a big ask. But if I don't ask, I'm never going to get it. He said, what's up? I said, we've been talking about this partnership for 2 years. And I've tried with all my might, because I believe in it, to protect the brand, to make it happen. He said, I get it, what do you need? I said, we need to go live, like tonight. And I need to supply you product at wholesale, so I can't afford to give you it in any other way. And you need to pay me in 7 days. I thought, if I get 2 out of 3, it's all right. And he went, done, done and done, what else do you need? And I literally nearly got arrested for doing naked cartwheels down Bromley High Street. Couldn't believe it. I rang my brother, my mum, my partner. I was like, okay, I think we're rolling. And of course, in true M&S style, because they are a very, very big beast, it still took 5 months. But we went live, and at that time when I did the deal, we were doing 1.8 million turnover at Nobody's Child. And we did something like 470,000 in the first 3 days on M&S.com. So we knew it was like dropping meat in a piranha tank. It was incredible. They've got such amazing reach. They were just desperate for more relevant younger fashion at the time. Now obviously they've upped their game, which has been amazing for both of us. And so fast forward to this year, we finished our year in April, which I share in confidence with us all, because it's obviously not public knowledge, but we finished at about 150 million gross revenue this year, which has been incredible. So very proud of that.
That's you're just dropping inspirational bombs here. So, I'm just loving it. And I feel like it's just elevating the hope in the room that it is possible to go from almost 0 to 100. I mean, you spoke about, just the power of it in a networking scenario. You just bumped into somebody, and this is where it starts. You guys are in a networking scenario right here, so you never know who's in the room. What advice would you give to somebody to really stand out when you know that, right, if I actually do go big, I'm going to have a lot more people to compete with?
So I think we've got to dissect that for anybody to really deliver it, right? I think the first instance is, it's great to have this huge ambition and belief, and you should always have it. And I'm dangerous for that stuff, because I am very ambitious, and I do believe I can do anything when I put my mind to it. And you have to have that belief, and you have to have that grit to get through the tough times. But what I will say is, when you peel the onion with me, you will also hopefully understand that I am a very logical thinker, right? So the building blocks of going from where you are to where you want to be, there has to be a logical path. You can't just go, oh, I'm going to sprout like mushrooms and open 2,000 stores around the world overnight. It's what are those building blocks? And then even before that, whilst your businesses are in their early stages, in their infancy, you've really got to be a deep thinker. What is the problem I'm solving? Is there actually demand for what I'm trying to build? Am I solving a problem? Am I meeting a demand? All of that thinking has to be done early. Now, with Nobody's Child, it's just a women's wear brand, and there's millions of them, but it's not just a women's wear brand, right? When we started our brand, we started for 2 or 3 real big reasons. One, when I looked around me, fast fashion was horrendous. You know, they were making stuff anywhere. They didn't care who was making it, who was paid, you know, is there kids, what's in the supply chain? No one cared. They just wanted to make money. And me and my brother were quite passionate because we had our own factories. We knew you could walk through one of my factories and everyone's smiling, everyone's fully paid, everything was ethical. We had a factory in London, which we were subsidising, but we loved it because it was close to our heart, because we started off as a factory. So the DNA of our brand was, how can we produce ethical fashion and be competitive? Sustainability didn't even feature in our vocabulary, right? This is like 11, 12 years ago when the idea was still being developed. And then we started Nobody's Child to be an ethical brand. But we also knew logically that because of our supply chain, we could be fast, we could be directional, our product would be amazing, we'll have compressed margins, so we'll be competitive. So we were like, okay, we've got the ingredients here to go and take our gloves off with the rest of the high street. And we did, naively, and we faced into, of course, competition like everybody else, but we stayed true to who we were. And then as sustainability featured, we started introducing more responsible fabrics. This was like year 3, year 4, and I remember it clearly. And then I said to my team, this feels like our calling. We can be one of the most responsible fashion brands. Not sustainable, but you can't be a sustainable fashion brand. I think that's hypocritical. But you can be responsible. Right? So if you're going to have a commercial entity and you're going to produce fashion, then do it responsibly. Source recycled, accredited fabrics. Make sure that everything you're doing, all your actions, your footprint is measured, your behavior, your supply chains are sustainable. Everybody is paid ethically. And so our ingredients were based on logic. And then what happened was we managed to hit this amazing air pocket where we were arguably the most authentic, responsible but affordable fashion brand. And the other responsible brands were charging £300 for their dresses. I'm not going to name and shame anyone, but they were charging £300 for the same dress from the same factory with the same material. And I'm like, you don't have to charge 300, we can do it for 80. Let's make it inclusive, let's make it affordable. And of course, customers are not stupid, right? That's another misconception by corporations, that they think consumers are naive. But serving women is like, they're the shrewdest when it comes to shopping fashion, right? Men, we're easy. We go in, we find something we like, we buy it in every colour, and we go back next year. Women don't do that. Women's behaviour is they'll look at price, it's sensitive, fit, style, everything matters. So you have to be authentic with your DNA, and when we established that, we found the rest happened organically, right? The rest just, you know, when we went from like 7 to 10 and then we grew, of course you have to be obsessed with execution and logistics and e-commerce, and it is painful and there's a lot to do. Today, we've got like 140 people in our head office and about 70 we employ across our stores. We've got 9 stores. I signed off another 3 last night that'll be up and running before Christmas. And so we're on our own trajectory to grow. And then we started going international. And we've gone into the US, and now we're in 100 doors in the US with Nordstrom and Von Maur and Dillard's. And now we're looking at European partners, and we're looking at the GCC for the Middle East. We're looking at APAC. But that's 11 years later, right? I didn't just wake up one day and go, great, we're going to go and get in every corner of the planet. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be patient, you've got to think about things, you've got to be considered. And so absolutely everyone in this room can go and replicate what we've done. The only challenge you'll face into is actually an opportunity. Today, you're at a point where you can think of everything and learn from our mistakes. And you've actually got the power of AI today, which is such an incredible tool that I didn't have the privilege of. When we were looking at what's our competitive landscape, that would take me 3 months and 6 people. Whereas today you can go on ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever tool you want to use, or Claude, and say, I want to know who are the top 6 responsible fashion brands in this market at that price point, and you get everything inside out, which is incredible. And now, ironically, we are retrospectively trying to fix that in our own teams. You know, how do we adopt AI? Because there's a phobia, there's a fear. And so last November, we addressed the whole business, and I said, right, here's my position on AI, guys. AI is not going to replace any of you. But we're going to double this business in the next 18 months. And I'm not going to double the headcount. So it's up to you how you embrace these tools to get us there. And now, of course, everyone feels empowered, no one's threatened, and they've been incredible. And so these are the sort of things that are important. And you know, I'm lucky because I straddle retail and tech. So as a tech vendor, I'm working with the world's biggest retailers and brands, and I go into these businesses and I meet these leadership teams, and they're miles behind. They're not even thinking about that. They don't care about culture. It's that they're sitting there and they're looking at numbers and they're going, right, 10% of my headcount's got to go. You know, and that's the challenge with big organisations. So while you're nascent, look at it as an opportunity and a privilege, as a foundation of where it is you want to go. Make sure that the building blocks are robust.
I love what you said. The biggest challenges you'll face are actually opportunities. It's a great frame of mind. I'm mindful of time, and I do want you guys to also throw in some questions. Does anyone have any burning questions? Right there we go. Introduce yourself as well, please.
Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
I'm still taking it in, but it's been like, my name is Xeni, and my question is, all the different things you mentioned, one thing that stood out to me is the relationships that you've been able to build with people. So even to get the evidence, to get the Samsung, it's through relationships. I mean, I feel like you're quite a personable person anyway. Do you have like tips for building, first of all, just genuine relationships anyway, but then also having a mind that, okay, I know I want to go in this direction with my business, how can I build relationships to help my business get in this direction?
Excellent question. So for those of you here, tips for building relationships, because clearly it's been quite key.
Yeah, so ironically, my business partner I referenced earlier, who's a very successful entrepreneur, and he's been my guardian angel through my journey. He's useless at saying anything back to me, he just listens. And that's enough for me, by the way. He's my soundboard. But he's very sharp, and I love him. And it was just interesting because he also says my superpower is people. And I say, well, that's really flattering, but I think we actually got some good ideas too. He's like, yeah, I get all that. But if you look at the DNA of our success, it has ultimately boiled down to people. Now, that's not a me thing, right? That's something that people have lost their way over the years, I believe. People forget that at some point, a human will make a decision. Even if it's a B2B relationship, if you're going to supply them mangoes, or if it's apparel, or you're going to build planes, whatever you want to do, you're still going to deal with another human being at some given point. So the biggest thing I can say is, be nice. Just be nice, right? I love being helpful. I'm a nightmare for it. It's a double-edged sword because my assistant goes nuts when I'm at these events. I say, yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and then of course, and I see everybody. I'm a trustee for a charity, for the Black-British Initiative, which I'm quite proud of. And I go to the event and I end up talking to 15 of the entrepreneurs after every event, every 6 weeks. And I try and be as helpful as possible, but I do have my own time constraints, which are proving challenging. But because of my work ethic, I run a pretty rigid framework. So what I'll do is, and Jasneet knows how to do this incredibly well for me, which is amazing. I'll say 2 mornings a week, I'm happy to meet 4 people for 15 minutes, from 7:30 till 8:30. If they're willing to get their ass out of bed at 7:30, I'll talk to them. And then I'll do, that's 8 before I've even started my week, right? And then I'll do probably another 4 or 5 that get into the woodwork somehow. So that means I'm meeting 12 people that are no benefit to me, but actually you keep putting that energy out there, it does come back buttered, right? And so the blend of volume, you're gonna have to kiss a lot of frogs. When you start raising capital, you're gonna have to start meeting a hell of a lot of different people, and they won't believe in your business like you will, for sure. So you've got to understand people at the same time. You can't take it personal, you can't be emotional. You have to look at things from their perspective. And that applies to the business, that applies to your personal relationships. And when you get that formula right, it does become self-perpetuating, but it does take time. I am known as thankfully being able to get to pretty much anyone on the planet I want within 24 hours, if I really wanted to. And that's a blend of my cap table, so I've got an amazing investor base who are super successful in their own right. And I leverage those relationships, I leverage those networks. It's a blend of events, going to places, being accessible, being nice, being helpful. And I just think that people forget that. And one of the things that I've been banging the drum for the last 2 or 3 years, when all of this started happening and people wanted me, bless you, and people started wanting me to talk at events and they wanted me to present what my businesses are doing, I got fed up with it. And I said, no, why don't we talk about why the businesses are here in the first place? Why don't we talk about the power of focus? Why don't we talk about the power of culture? Because these are things that, and the power of conviction, because these are things that people overlook. But without those 3 ingredients, none of that's possible. So if you think about all 3 businesses, I can attribute the success of every single one to, at some point, those 3 things were fundamental to where we are today. And that comes down to people. So yeah, it's a great question. It's not one, unfortunately, you can give someone tips on, but the main ingredient is just be nice. Be professional, and and that helps.
Great. We'll get 2 quick questions. Saw your hand up first. Go.
Hi Andrew, thank you for sharing your journey. It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Would like to get some idea, or you could share any experience from you. That I'm a founder of a solar panel blind company. So I identified the problem to be solved, and I've spoken to nearly 200 potential users. I got 86% who say I would like to be your early users to test my prototype. My question is, how can I get the first investment to help me move from problem to be solved, business idea into the first MVP without giving away from the business?
So that's a type of investor, right? So the first thing you need to understand is that different people will invest in different businesses at different stages. That took me a while to understand, by the way. But there's a correlation between the maturity of the business and the risk. And for somebody to invest in a business which is still an idea is very high risk. So they're expecting, the risk to reward equation to be adequate. So they will want to come in at a very low valuation, very early on. I suspect they're going to want a material position in the business for very little exposure, and then it's compelling for them. And that's a decision you need to really think about yourself. Are you prepared today to give away 25% of your business? I'm guessing the numbers, by the way. But to give away 25% of my business to raise what I need to get this started, right? Once you've established that, then you've got to start looking at who is an early stage angel or a pre-seed angel. And I would also look at people that are in adjacent industries or relevant industries that understand what you say faster. Because if you come to me with that idea, I don't understand the industry. So the first thing you're going to do is spend 3 months trying to educate me, which is going to be too long for you and frustrate you. But if you go to somebody who's come from that industry or had success in that industry, immediately they can understand the problem you're trying to solve. So it's really about, again, it's this thesis of spend as much time as you can on this side of the fence thinking about things will make your life so much easier when you decide to actually do stuff. So you just got to research it. And again, this is where AI becomes quite powerful, right? You go and ask who are the top 10 people in this industry, or the most influential, most senior, what are the biggest companies, who's on the board, who's in the management team, and that will give you your first 100 targets to approach. And of those 100, 90 won't be interested. 5 of them will probably go, good idea, but not for me. And 5 you'll have real conversations with. But unfortunately, that's the sort of rule of thumb. It's quite a big pool you need to fish in to catch what you need, but people will do it. But you've got to cut corners, and those corners have to be, how will it resonate, will they understand the opportunity? But if you've got validation through 86% of people, I would say for an early stage business with just have an idea, if they can validate that by speaking to these people, that's incredible. If you can get these people to pre-commit, actually then you have leverage to raise the money at a much lower risk So I think a little bit of polishing the diamond, I think we can get you there quite quickly.
Really, really good tips there. Last question.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this story. Very inspiring. I have a couple of questions. Both are related.
Just one.
Yeah, both are related. So I understand the vision and belief that you spoke about. What I want to understand is the building blocks. Right? So say for example, Fabulous.
Yeah.
And you said you met a Disney guy.
Yeah.
And that became your first client. But before you met him, what were the building blocks for this business? And second question is, you also spoke about AI and doubling your business in 18 months. So again, what are the building blocks to build a business or maybe to make it double in next 18 months?
So my book for that.
No, good questions. I mean, the first one's easy to address, right? Think about, and we're all of a generation that will understand and appreciate this. First, we had hardware, PCs, then we had software, then we had middleware, then we had data aggregation, like product information management, master data management, PLMs and ERPs, which is all the sort of software that is used traditionally in workflow in big manufacturing and retail businesses. What we didn't have was data with integrity, right? So you can have all of these systems in your organization, but having a single trusted system of record, a source of truth, nobody was addressing. People talk about it, but no one was actually addressing that. So what we architectured was a solution for aggregating data in the supply chain to give you a source of truth. Now, it transpired that, I didn't know this obviously back then, everybody needs that. Automotive, tobacco, licensing, retail, there is probably not an industry in the world that doesn't have a data integrity problem. And if you think about the way the world's evolving, regulation, you now need to report, that reporting needs to be accurate. That's data integrity again. So the problem I was trying to solve was a generic one. The reason I focused on licensing is because no one in the world was addressing it, so I thought, what a great opportunity. I've got no competition, I'm going to start there. But I'm going to keep going, right? But the technology, the building blocks, the logic, was solving a fundamental challenge first. The doubling the business thesis is quite easy. Not easy, what's the word? It's easy, it's simple but not easy. I think I was it the other way around. So we've been growing 40-50% year on year anyway for the last 5 years. So doubling our business in 18 to 24 months is a realistic trajectory regardless. All I'm challenging my team to do is to do that cost efficiently, right? Let's leverage the tools. So for example, we implemented our first AI tools for customer service just over Christmas. And 70% today of our customer service queries are opened and closed by the bots. Because they're normal. Where's my delivery? Where's my refund? Where's my apology? You know, normal customer service stuff, right? And our response rate is down from 28 hours to 9 minutes. And we had 5 people and 1 left on their own accord. And we've decided we don't need to replace them because the other 4 are chilling now because 70% of their volume is automatic, which is great, which means we've got headroom. I'm not replacing anybody. We've improved as a business. And so if you can apply that, and not every function can have that sort of privilege, but if you can apply that in 3-4 touch points, you have a significant contribution to your bottom line whilst continuing to grow the business. So the logic is pretty robust. No problem.
Guys, I wish we could go on all day. Maybe next year we'll have you for a whole week. Because there's so much wealth of knowledge to pour out, and I'm sure you've all got loads and loads of questions, but I'm mindful of time, and thank you so much for the gems that you dropped. Can you give